Hi guys, how you guys doing? Thank you so much for being here. My name is Joshua Madalito Chiundiza, and I am a cultural consultant and independent music producer from Harare, Zimbabwe. And I'm here to share a few thoughts about the music industry and the creative industry as a whole. The topic is decolonizing the art industry, unleashing the power of African cultural heritage. It's a bit heavy, it's a bit serious, so I'm going to do my best to be serious. But now, when we speak of the creative industry, it's quite broad, and so is the music industry. So I will be focusing more on the role of the artist and looking at it from an African perspective. And by African perspective, I mean that I will be referencing lessons that I've learned from my own culture and from my own experience as a Shona person from Zimbabwe. I will be tapping into Shona traditional knowledge and focusing on key elements that have defined and continue to define Zimbabwean and African artistry. Um, yeah, so I would like to firstly begin by asking you all a very simple question. And that question is, what is an artist? And I'm hoping that this is something that you can think about as we go along in the talk, um, because I think that it's important for every artist to reflect on their context and not allow industry definitions to determine what it means to be an artist. An artist isn't merely the foundation of the art industry. As history has proven, as history has shown, the artist is creator and chief of our societies. The artist isn't here just for aesthetics. The artist isn't here just to be a product of the industry. Now, one thing that I love about being African, more so being Zimbabwean, is how innovative we are. Um, we have this ability to reconfigure things to fit our purpose, especially in very difficult and limited circumstances. You can see in the picture. Um, I think this is some very innovative thinking. Um, so whether it's overloading second-hand Japanese cars to transport goods and people, or creating parallel markets for our own money-changing systems, to get the most out of our hard-earned cash, these are examples that we see all across the continent. And some people choose to define it as resilience, but if we pay close attention to it, we will see it for what it is: innovation. Because innovation on the continent should not look like how it looks in Europe or the United States, because this is Africa. So some solutions are great, others are just plain illegal, but considering the circumstances, considering the way our economies function, considering the way our politicians function, it is what it is. You have to do what you have to do. And all of this represents typical African innovation. The situation is not perfect, but we will find a way to make it work. And it's this finding a way to make it work that we find in the daily struggle. The struggle of the everyday that sits on a timeline between past, present, and future. Back in the day, our ancestors did what they had to do. And now we are here doing what we have to do. And this is where our creativity truly manifests itself, in the daily grind, in the daily hustle. We celebrate the everyday on radio, on television, live on stage, in our lyrics, rhythms, and beats. It's the everyday knowledge and innovation that is then taken by big conglomerates and sold back to us in nice, shiny packaging. But it's also this everyday that is giving us more of a holistic view of ourselves, a view that is increasingly detaching itself from colonial tropes. It's allowing us to see our history with more realism and less romanticism. Our history is big. African history is massive. And our colonial past only plays a minor role in the African story. So if we're going to discuss ideas of decolonization in any shape or form, African culture, African history must be the first point of reference in that conversation. Agents that function in the industry, record labels, promoters, touring agents, etc., particularly those that are foreign to the continent, need to challenge their function in accordance to our culture and our history and ensure that they're not working with a settler's mentality where it's simply about extraction of cultural resources and exclusive economics, because we all know that the artist is usually the last to get paid. What we need is not merely a dismantling of colonial systems, but more of an implementation and celebration of everyday African innovation, African realism, which is the everyday. And as agents on the continent, we need to ensure that we're not merely mimicking foreign ideas, but incorporating African knowledge systems and challenging the status quo on on a local and global level. Thankfully, it's already happening. There's already a blending and mixing that's already happening. We can see it in how African artists are dominating the global music charts. Afrobeats and Amapiano are the sounds at the moment. But there's room for more. More genres, more mixing and blending of African genres. And the more will always stem from the artist. That's where it all begins. Um, yeah, I've always wanted to be an artist in some shape or form. My mother is a musician and a music therapist, so the house was always full of art and music. There was always an instrument to play with. There was always pencils and crayons lying around to, pick up a piece of paper and draw. So home was my first taste of art, and art was my favorite subject in high school. I actually won a couple of competitions and felt pretty good about myself. I really felt that I was on my way to becoming the next Picasso or the next Van Gogh. That was the dream. Unfortunately, my primary and high school education did very little to cultivate a healthy understanding of art. For those of you that are familiar with Zimbabwe, Zimbabwean history, you will know that the country north of the Limpopo was once called Rhodesia, after some English guy, I've forgotten his name. But yeah, oh yeah, Cecil John Rose, him, yeah. And when we gained independence, the late former president, Robert Mugabe, was instrumental in spearheading what we can call an education revolution. He made great steps for the nation. His mantra was education for all. But still, it was an education that was based on the British curriculum. Now, I appreciate my education, but at the same time, it's important to note that it wasn't a balanced one. My early understandings of art and music gave me a very superficial appreciation of Western creativity and a very low view of African creativity, a very low view of Zimbabwean and African art and music. My teens were thoroughly dominated by Western art and music. I had made up my mind I was going to be one of two things: a painter, like I said before, inspired by Picasso, Van Gogh, or a rapper. I wanted to make that rap money. I mostly listened to Radio 3, so Radio 3 back in the day was like a very popular radio station because it played all the cool music. Um, and it played my favorite genre at the time, hip hop. Um, and no one listened to traditional or contemporary Zimbabwe music. That was relegated to a station called Radio 2, which was their main target market was people living in the rural areas. So no one listened to Radio 2. And by no one, I mean not the cool kids. Um, and all of this influenced me. The way I looked at Western music and the way that I looked at Zimbabwean and African music. By the time I was about to finish high school, I had the plan. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to be Jay-Z. All I had to do was move to New York, sell drugs, gain some street cred, and take over the rap game. But instead, I moved to Sydney, Australia, and studied animation. Now, I don't know about you guys, but animators don't really have that much street cred. Like, I don't think anyone, no offense to any animators in the room, but I really don't think anyone is intimidated by any sort of animators. Animators are some of the nicest people that I've met, and I was only interested in making that rap money. So alongside studying animation, I still pursued my hip hop career. But instead of only wanting to be a rapper, I wanted to be a producer as well. But this is where things began to change for me. Because a lot of the hip hop producers that I was listening to at the time used sampling as their core method of production. And it's a concept that made me think about my own cultural and musical heritage. I'm like, these guys, who are they sampling? What are they sampling? Why are they sampling these artists? It's because it's their culture. So that made me think and question my identity as an artist because I wanted to stand out, I wanted to sound unique. So I started listening to Radio 2. I started listening to Sungura, I started listening to Jit, I started listening to Chimurenga music. I started paying closer attention to the composition styles of Zimbabwean legends like Thomas Mapfumo and the vocal strains of Ambuya Stella Chiweshe. I moved back to Zimbabwe in 2008 where things were pretty hot economically. And together with my cousins, we formed a music collective called the Monkey Nuts. Interesting name, but we thought that it was a name that would capture people's attention. And thankfully, my cousins and I were on the same page. We wanted to go deep into our musical heritage and create a unique version of hip hop that was distinctly Zimbabwean. A few people began to notice. 2014, we got signed to BBE Music, a label based in London, and our first major gig was opening for De La Soul in France. That completely blew our minds. But we were under no illusions. This wasn't that we've made it moment, but more of a reality check. That creating from your own and for your own was that place that we always wanted to be. Borrowing from Zimbabwean music heritage and recreating sounds for my generation, because that's what innovation is, working with what you have. Preserving custom and tradition without being conservative. Focusing on the core value, which is our humanity, and being able to communicate that for personal and communal growth. I didn't have to be like Jay-Z. I just had to be myself. Now, one of the lies that colonialists put forward in terms of justifying imperialism was that the continent was this dark, isolated space, void of culture and civilization, with no contribution to history whatsoever, and that the European and the African were very different in their intellectual makeup, the European being far superior. And in order for the African to advance, the African had to break away from his primitive state and take on European civilization. It seems like it's quite the thing with human beings, the need to control and manipulate people to conform to a standard. We see it now even in a free and independent Africa, where politicians use various manipulations to try and control the masses. It's the same with big business and the private sector. It's the same in the music and creative industry, where the artist, again, is always the last to get paid. The economics are still exclusive, where only a small number of artists make it to the top. It sounds a little bit like old Rhodesian economic structures, where only the Rhodesians benefited at the expense of Africans. Do colonial tropes still linger? What models are we using to sign artists? Are we doing enough to shift these models to fit our context? Because this is Africa. What's true is that we as Africans have always viewed ourselves within the wider scope of humanity. The ideology that I'm speaking of is widely known as Ubuntu. The Shona call it Wunu. It's a thinking that is expressed in multiple societies across the continent with interesting variations. But it's the fluidity and adaptability of Hunu that has allowed us to innovate on external influences, whether they were forced on us or by choice. Artificial lines have split, and of course, closely related societies have been separated, creating colonial boundaries and economic systems that still affect us to this day. Hunu extends itself beyond colonial prisms. It's a philosophy that has shaped our music. It's a philosophy that has shaped our art. We should not speak of it or think of it as a cliche marketing gimmick for the continent. Ubuntu impacts every aspect of African society, especially in defining the role of the artist. Let me just. The Shona people of Zimbabwe. So Shona is a general term. The Shona people are made up of various ethnic groups. So I'm just using Shona in a general sense. Historically, the Shona people have viewed art from an everyday perspective, being able to translate their creativity for everyday purposes. This functional view presents a unique look at the artist in Shona society. So I come back to the question that I asked at the beginning. What is an artist? Because if we view the artist separate from Western music and creative industry definitions, they thrive as a valued contributor to society, where the art practice is deeply rooted and attached to the functions of the everyday. The mode of the artist takes on more of guys, the English, let me just bring it back. It takes on more of a utilitarian, yes, role in Shona culture, where the studio and the performance space is the artist's daily environment, what the art world likes to call public spaces. A person that makes art in Shona culture can be referred to as musiki. And musiki, with a small m, means creator or maker. And already that shifts the idea of the artist to a different level. The artist isn't limited to their craft, whether they're a musician, a dancer, a sculptor, whatever. But they are acknowledged for how they can apply their creativity in multiple fields. The act of making or creating is known as kusika, which means to make or to create. Now, it's no coincidence that these words are all very similar in terms of how they sound. The root philosophy of these words is technically found in nature. For the Shona, all creation is attributed to Musikavanu, the creator of humans, or Musiki, with a capital M, the supreme creator. Reverence of Musiki dates back to ancient Great Zimbabwe, uh, where the architects built the city inspired by the natural hills that surrounded the area. So the Shona don't view the artist in the typical industry sense. They are seen more as creators. The artist is primary. The artist is a farmer. The artist is an engineer. The artist is an architect, sculptor, prophet, priest, healer, teacher. Their creativity cannot and should not be limited to art industry definitions. This is how the Shona view the artist. There are 7 key elements that define the Shona artist. And these elements are represented in this centric flow. These elements tend to come with a question that asks how. How the artist's work functions within the outward flow of Hunu. Hunu being Ubuntu. So we have the first one right in the middle. Let me just quickly, yes. Hunu, which is basically humanity. And the question that follows that is, how does this art contribute to the betterment of our society? Then we have Ivu, which is soil and land. And the question that follows that is, how does this art contribute to the preservation of the land and its resources? Then we have Muka, Nejisimwa, which means animals and plants. How does this art contribute to the conservation of animal and plant life? Then we have Denga, which is sky. And the question that follows that is, how does this art help us to understand more about time and space? Then we have Midzimu, which is ancestors. How does this art help us to remember and honor those who came before us? And then we have Mondoro, which translates to the royal and great ancestors. And the question that follows that is, how does this art help to define our identity and trace our origins? And then we have the last one, Mwari Musiki, God, the creator. How does this art reflect and help us understand the greatness of our creator? So again, ladies and gentlemen, I ask, and I'm hoping that this is something we can maybe discuss. What is an artist? According to the Shona, the artist is a creator, challenging economics and geopolitics, functioning as a prophetic voice of where their societies can go. So synthesis of the past, present, and future should always be the goal for the artist, without the discrimination or fear of seeming to be too African or not African enough. And to the musicians, the artists, your musicality, your creativity is only a fragment of your creative resource. Yes, we should make money. I want to make money, guys. I do not want to be broke. I really want to make money. But don't let the industry limit you in terms of how you can make your money. Because ultimately, your creativity allows you to translate your talent across multiple fields. And if there's anything that Africa has taught me, is that you have to be multifaceted. You have to be multifaceted. And this is something that I greatly appreciate. So, yeah, I've come to the end of my presentation. Um, does anyone have any questions or any comments that they would like to put forward? Thank you. No questions? I can go. No, cool. All right. Thank you very much. I am available to, if you think of something, I'm here all week. I'm available to talk. I'm available to listen and learn from you as well. Thank you so much. Oh, okay. To be honest, it's a difficult space to maneuver because, um, like I said, I think when we talk about the industry, people have a certain idea of what it means to be like a musician. If you're a musician, a lot of young people think, oh, the best way to go about it is make your music, get signed, you'll make lots of money, you'll tour, and that's it. But the reality on the ground is that that's not how it works. The majority of artists, the majority of musicians, particularly in Zimbabwe, are not making a lot of money even though their music is being played on radio or their videos are being seen on television. And I think a lot of that is because our education, or should I say, our understanding of the music industry is very limited in scope. We don't have enough institutions, we don't have enough spaces that are helping us to open up the conversation on what the music industry is or what the creative industry is and all of the different elements and dynamics that help to bring it together, because everyone wants to be a rapper, everyone wants to be a producer, everyone wants to be the manager, but there's so much, there's so many components that are needed to put the music industry together. So if everyone is focusing on, the popular um, elements, it means that we're not really building anything at all. So it's been quite difficult to maneuver the situation. I would say that a lot of my work tends to be appreciated out of Zimbabwe, um, which is unfortunate. But I understand it because, like I said, we don't really have spaces where we have these kind of conversations where we sit down and discuss and break down how things started, how things function, and how we can expand on the conversation of being an artist. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry? Yeah. Um, yes, I think so, but I'm not too. I mean, I think that's a little bit subjective. I think like I think some musicians now that are popular believe that they are functioning in that sense. The music that they're creating, it might not be the music that I like, but in a sense, they're creating something that points to where we are as a people and where we are right now in terms of how we're expressing our creativity. So um, I don't think it's something that I think about really at all. I guess I'm just just trying to do my thing, I guess, and just move forward. Yeah. Sorry? Yes, I am an old soul. I am a very old soul. Yep. Yep. Yeah, it is. It is. And I think what's unfortunate, I think a lot more could be happening, but I think what's unfortunate about Africa, when we talk about ancestors, there seems to be we seem to overly mystify it. Like it becomes a super spiritual thing when in actual fact spirituality is a manifestation of, like imagination really at the end of the day. Like we are in a spiritual place right now. Someone thought of this space and they brought it to life. So I think sometimes we lose a sense of um, appreciating our ancestry because we tend to overly mystify it at times, and that tends to, we tend to lose people sometimes in that sense. Yeah. Sorry, man. Hi. Hi. Yeah. Okay. Right. I think the easy answer is education. But at the same time, that's also a complicated sort of space to work in because looking at the Zimbabwean curriculum, there isn't enough effort or emphasis beyond academics. Like our curriculum is very academic based. Like our parents, they're not interested in allowing their kids to do stuff like art or environmental science. Or if you're doing something, it's either you're going to do your maths, your science, and we tend to stick to that. But I think in order to get young people to buy into indigenous knowledge, I think it has to be reimagined. We have to find new ways of presenting it that are interesting. Um, I'm glad Tara is here. I've worked with her before. I was part of a VR residency actually here in Cape Town, and I think that's stuff like that um, helps to sort of bring indigenous knowledge into the future. Like being able to repackage it in a way that is for the now, but also futuristic. I think that's something young people tend to buy into quite a bit. Yeah, I think technology is just one way that's going to really play a big role in helping to repackage indigenous knowledge. Yeah. Any more questions, guys? On Spotify. So I'm part of a new project we started 2 years ago called Bantu Spaceship. We are an electronic, an Afro electronic music outfit that's based in Zimbabwe. Actually, I have a copy of I don't know. Does anyone here have a vinyl player? I just have one to give away, guys, and I don't know how we're gonna. Ah. Uh, yes, I do. I think so. Guys, I don't know how I'm sorry. Maybe I should have brought. Okay, all right. Okay, fine. All right, cool. No, unfortunately, I didn't bring any. I'm so sorry, guys. But yeah, Bantu Spaceship is available online. And yeah, you can just Google and the Spotify link will come out. Cool. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much.